Here. Excellent. Well, I'm going to begin because we're hoping that our fifth candidate is able to join us just in a few minutes. But I wanted to say, first of all, welcome to all who have joined us. We're up to 90 participants, and that's wonderful. My name is Brian McIntosh. I'm going to be your moderator for the evening. And it's my privilege and pleasure to do that. I'm a member of all three of the sponsoring organizations for this town hall this evening, this Etobicoke-Lakeshore Municipal Election Town Hall. And those three sponsoring groups are Etobicoke Climate Action, EcuLinks Etobicoke, and the Central Etobicoke Community Hub Initiative. And all three organizations are very glad to be doing this tonight as we bring this opportunity to hear candidates' views and opinions prior to Election Day in Toronto. I want to as well begin with an acknowledgement that we acknowledge the history, spirituality, culture, and stewardship of the land of the Indigenous peoples of this region, including the Huron-Wendat, Petun, and Seneca nations, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit, who are Anishinaabe people. And this territory is covered by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee and the Ojibwa and allied nations. And we seek to live in respect, peace, and right relations with our Indigenous neighbors as we live, work, and play upon their traditional territories. I also want to introduce our candidates for this evening. Again, I'm hoping that Zainel Ari will join us shortly, but in addition, we have Mark Grimes, who is the incumbent here in Lakeshore. We have Bonnie Hu, and we have Amber Morley, and we have Marco Valley. And we're very pleased that we can be joined by so many of the candidates in this riding. There's only one in this ward, I should say. There's only one candidate who's on the ballot who is unable to join us tonight, and that is Mary Markovich, and she regrets that she's unable to attend tonight. My job as the moderator is to make the debate civil, to ensure that we all allow time for each other to answer. I would encourage you to mute when you're not answering. That would be helpful for the Zoom webinar technology as well. But just to keep us on topic, you'll note that there is a timer. Cora Dusk is here with 3 colored sheets of paper, and every time you have an answer, she'll start with the red, with the green, sorry, which gives you what, a minute, I think, left in your answer. And then the yellow would be 30 seconds, and the red would be time to stop. So do a quick summary when you see the red sign. But I do want to note that the Zoom chat is not enabled for our audience participants tonight, but the Q&A feature is enabled. And you will see the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And what you can do is submit your questions and then vote for the 2 questions that you may already see on that Q&A feature that you think are the most important to ask. We have 3 pre-authorized questions that we've already circulated to the candidates, and we'll be asking them first. But then we're hoping to take questions from the audience participants tonight. So you'll have 3 minutes to start with an opening remark, each candidate. And then for the questions that we ask, you'll have 2 minutes to respond. So just note that. I'm going to go in alphabetical order according to last name, and then I'll alternate who starts the next question, answer, and so on. So that will be up to me to try to keep you in line and on track. Cora has already displayed the cards, so that's fine. So what I'm going to do is invite, first of all, opening remarks. And because Ari is not here, I'm going to switch to Mark Grimes as the incumbent, who's the second in line alphabetically, to share a 3-minute opening remark. Mark.
Thank you. The floor is mine.
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm your councillor, Mark Grimes, and I'd like to take the time to thank our host, Etobicoke Climate Action and Etobicoke Community Hub for putting this on tonight. I want to first off start by saying it's been an absolute privilege for me to serve this community, the community I was raised in. I brought my 5 children up and now 2 young grandkids that live in the area. So it's a community I love, and I love what I do every day. That's why I'm seeking re-election. And I'm running this past term. We've seen the importance of experienced leadership. We've seen a lot of turnover at council. And I think what we've gone through in the pandemic, I think I have the experience to bring us through what has to happen in the next 4 years. This global pandemic has been trying for everyone, and we've made some significant progress in all areas. Housing, thousands of affordable units are coming online. We've built thousands. There's more to come. We have more to do. Transit now, all 3 levels of government, the provincial government, the federal government, the city have all agreed on what the plan is, how it's going to be paid for. Shovels are in the ground. We have tunnels in the ground to build the Ontario line. We've got the new Park Lawn GO station, which we fought for at City Council. We've got the waterfront transit that's on the line, and we're dusting off the old Bloor Sherway extension to Sherway. As you see the development happening at the Trillium Health Center, the secondary plan that's out at Sherway, and the Dundas Street, which is one of the major growth corridors in the city. We've made big, significant investment in our parks and public spaces. We've done dozens of playgrounds, have all been refurbished in our parks. Community centers, we're building a number of community centers. We've saved some community centers. Franklin Horner, a key one down in Alderwood. We have the Christie Lands will be a brand new state-of-the-art community center with libraries, daycare centers. We have the 6-point interchange program where there's be another community center, state-of-the-art library, pools, things that are all going to be very key to those communities as they grow. We have many things underway over the last 4 years, but there is a lot more to do. We've made progress, enormous task ahead of us. We have a $1 billion budget shortfall when we get back to council to address that. We found efficiencies over the last years under John Tory's leadership, but there's more to find. The cost of living is getting out of control. We can't be asking taxpayers to take more on. We need someone with real experience to make sure we continue to provide these services and the people rely on. We don't want to be slashing services. The last thing I want to do. I think people realize the job has finally changed over the last 4 years. We are under siege by development. We are now the largest ward in Canada by population. I don't think people know that, but we're bigger than St. Catharines. We're nearly the size of Barrie. That's how big our ward is now. So it's taken real experience to balance the competing priorities of so many people. I have organized a great team at City. All my staff, they know the ins and outs of these communities. Staff members dedicated to certain communities. There's massive projects underway that, Christie's site was massive. What's going to happen there? The Cloverdale Mall site is another massive project. The Sherway secondary plan we just completed. 6 points.
Sum up.
6 points, another big project underway. So, I'm going to continue to work, hold the developers' feet to the fire, but, we have to make sure there's experience to follow these projects through. And I believe I'm the candidate to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mark. And I'm going to turn to Bonnie Hu next to offer a 3-minute opening remark.
Hello, my name is Bonnie Hu. I earned a Bachelor of Arts degree this year, majoring in linguistics and minoring in political science and diaspora and transnational studies from the University of Toronto. And I have started a second degree in urban studies. I have been living in the Greater Toronto area for most of the past 11 years and in Etobicoke-Lakeshore for the past 3 years. As a young single person renting in the city, my rent has gone up over the years, and I worry that one day I will be priced out of the city. Some of my friends who are also in their 20s like me have already left the city, and the cost of living is a big factor in these migrations. I am currently renting at Queensway and Islington, and I feel lucky that I live in a very convenient and well-designed neighborhood. Grocery and other retail stores of all kinds are within walking distance. Some are open 24/7. I do not possess a driver's license as I do not need one, and I believe that should be a more common thing. I believe in increasing transit and decreasing car dependency. Ward 3 is the most populated ward in the city. It's no wonder that so many people want to live here. People here are the nicest out of any place I have lived, and I have been working as an essential worker here for the past 3 years. And even through the pandemic, people have been nice to me. However, there are some issues that I would like to see changed. The housing supply has not kept up with the skyrocketing demand. I would like to see policies that increase the housing supply. I would like to also see increased investment in transit. I believe more subways should be built and that there should be more frequent service on the TTC. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. And next is Amber for a 3-minute opening remark. Amber.
Thank you so much, Brian, and thank you to the organizers and the participants and my fellow candidates, of course, here tonight. I've always been excited about democracy since I was a very young woman. I've worked as an advocate and an organizer in Etobicoke-Lakeshore since I was, just before puberty. So it's been quite some time. And I've worked on the margins of our community, trying to gain access to a seat at the table, participating at numerous working groups, community organizations, including the Central Etobicoke Community Hub Group and others who are hosting us here tonight. I have been a fixture of this community for as long as I can remember, hosting all candidates debates before I was old enough to vote, and working to mobilize residents around the municipal governance process. So having a voice, participating at deputations, and making sure that the city that we are building is counting and including the needs and the values of the residents that we're here to serve. I have not seen that always happen. And one thing that I learned over my few years working at City Hall is how desperately needed a voice like mine with varied experiences, including like Bonnie, being a renter in our city, being someone who utilizes transit, who's still working, in many aspects of my life to break the cycle of poverty and other really heavy issues that are disproportionately impacting some members of our community over others. We've seen over the last many years inequality growing to a place that is unacceptable. It's a tale of 3 cities in the city of Toronto, and depending on your socioeconomic status or your social location, really has a big impact on your possibilities for the future. And I think that it's important in a city as incredible as ours that we are working consistently, actively, and together to build a community for all. I think everyone's voice in our community matters. The experiences of those, especially people who are struggling and who are feeling the pinch of climate change, of inflation, and frankly, of a lack of overall engagement and support from our government. I think it's time for change, and we're hearing that in every neighborhood in Etobicoke-Lakeshore, and I look forward to bringing the change that Etobicoke-Lakeshore residents deserve and getting busy on all of the massive building projects and exciting work ahead for us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amber. And lastly, Marco Valley.
Hi there. So I'd like to start off, thank you, Brian, for hosting, and for the organizations, ECA, AccuLinks, Community Hub. Thank you very much for hosting, fellow candidates. Thanks for coming out. Great to see everyone out, or as many as possible tonight. It's always fun when we all get together. And so I want to start off by talking a little bit about myself. I am a resident of Ward 3 myself. I have a young family here. I have a toddler son. And a lot of my journey to get here to this debate actually started with that, right? My wife and I used to go for runs, then we got pregnant, we started going for walks. And like all the other residents, we noticed, right? All these residential towers are going up, but we don't have the supporting resources for the rest of the community to go with those towers, right? And that is kind of where everyone's issues are starting and flow from, right? Without the resources, affordability isn't just a dollars and cents issue, right? Without the transit, you maybe can't get to your work. So now you're limited in what you can choose, right? We have people making professional, personal, financial sacrifices in the name of affordability, but they don't always have to come from the same side of that problem, right? I have personal friends that wanted to come to the area, but couldn't because there wasn't available daycare, right? And so people are limited from coming in and coming out and where they can go. The reason why I think I'm the best candidate for this is because I've spent my adult life in the military. I currently work in operations, and I was in operations during COVID. I was there when we took the policy plan that was going to happen and actually executed on it and went forward, right? I was there when we reopened our local training establishment to continue our pipeline of trained and qualified soldiers that were able to help out in places, including the long-term care facilities, right? I actually received a commendation for my ability to plan in an evolving environment. And I think that's what makes me very suited for this. But at the same time, I feel like I'm a very approachable person. I feel like I'm a kind of guy that people can just kind of see it about, and they want to talk to me. They want to say what's going on, and I want to hear what's going on. I love engaging with people. I love hearing what you're doing, what you're up to. I love when people ask me what I'm up to, right? We're all social people. We're social creatures. And for some people, you're out every day in the middle. Some people, you're out every now and then. And we need to have spaces that encourage that allow everyone to do that. Once everyone feels like community, it allows you to age in your community. It allows you to live longer there. And that helps increase affordability because it all comes back to the choices that we allow people to have at home. And that's what I plan to champion. The idea that we can live here, we can work here, we can get old here, we can have our families here, we can choose not to have families here. Everyone has a different idea of what is fun and exciting and tomorrow. We should be enabling all of them. And that's where I feel I can come in. I can hear everyone, and we need that voice. We have the strong mayor legislation in. So now you need an even stronger voice that can not just represent us, but can also turn around and get the other councillors. Hey, this is affecting all of us and our constituents need this. And that's where I feel we need the representation. And that's where I feel I can best bring that for all of us. So thank you.
Thank you, Marco. Friends, I just want to again thank all who have joined us for tonight. I want to mention again quickly that the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen is open for you to introduce any questions into this process that you might have for these candidates. And we will be asking a question on climate change, a question on social justice, and a question on the economy, and we'll be launching into that in just a moment. But I wanted you to know that you can contribute to this process tonight by using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. You can also vote for questions that others have asked that you think are good questions, and they will rise to the top by the end of the evening. The following 3 questions that each candidate's going to have an opportunity to answer have been given to them in advance so that they can be thinking about their response in a little more thoughtful way. And they can address these 3 important issues to the 3 sponsoring organizations. But we're asking the candidates to state as clearly as possible what actions you think the city should take itself and what actions will require close cooperation with the province and with the federal government. So our first question is on climate change, and the first person to respond will be Bonnie. Specifically, Bonnie, we would like to hear your thoughts on the actions City Council should take to facilitate the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions in Toronto, to meet or exceed Transform TO's targets for Toronto, to facilitate waste reduction, create a more electric vehicle friendly, livable, walkable, bikeable city, and to protect the natural environment within and surrounding Toronto. So tell us what steps you as a councillor would take to advocate and promote the course or courses of action you outline. And you have 2 minutes. Bonnie, go ahead.
I support a zero food waste plan in partnership with food retailers such as grocery stores and restaurants. No one should go hungry when tons of food that has at one time been consumable ends up being discarded. I support transit-oriented development and to move away from car dependency. More subways should be built and bus service should be more frequent. Areas around transit stations should be densified. I support high-density housing development in the form of high-rise condos and apartment buildings within 800 meters and especially within 400 meters of major transit stations. I support 15-minute cities, a planning concept where all major amenities such as grocery stores, schools, and parks are located within a 15-minute walking distance from residential areas. Personally, I am proudly car-free. I live at Queensway and Islington, where almost everything I need is within walking distance, and I live steps away from transit stops going in all 4 directions. I am proud to minimize my fossil fuel consumption through my own transportation choices. I would like to see development and infrastructure be moved into that direction so that more people can live how I live. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. I'm not going to repeat the question for each candidate. They have it in advance anyway, so it's not necessary to hear it. This one about climate change. Our next respondent is Amber. Amber.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate this question, and I think it's really important at this point as we're tackling a climate emergency, and there are very important targets that we are urgently working to achieve. We have to shift our leadership from an egocentric to an eco-centric, where we understand that everything is absolutely connected, the way that big polluters or major corporations are not paying their fair share to keep our waterways, streams, and lakefronts safe and protected. When we look at how our city's infrastructure below ground is so behind the times that we're seeing a situation where our wastewater and our sewer water are all, and our stormwater rather, are all coming together when we have major storm events, and literally the things we flush down the toilet are going into our lake. I do not think that's a tenable situation when we look at the impacts environmentally, and these are areas that we as a city need to take urgent and immediate action. I agree with Bonnie. I think one of the most clear and obvious ways in which we can get busy on providing alternative modes of transportation to residents to move through the city is by investing in the infrastructure, which is our TTC and other modes of transit. The waterfront LRT has been on the books for over a decade. From last I checked, it's probably more like 15 years now. And we've not seen significant leadership or funding despite the major growth that our city and of course our community is experiencing. So there are a lot of ways, I think a lot of tools the city can be using and a lot of priorities if we shift our focus and the way that we lead to prioritize our stewardship of nature and understanding that we have a responsibility to clean it up and leave it in better shape for the next generation that we found it.
Thank you, Amber. And Marco, you are next. 2 minutes.
Okay, so I'm not going to say anything crazy here when I open with the fact that we need to focus on an effort to reduce the cars on the road. And I think a big part of that, like everyone, is we need to increase funding in transit. And a big reason, though, the cornerstone of that for me is currently it feels like a punishment to take transit. And for those who don't have a choice, they're doubly punished because they don't have the option. And so that's kind of where it starts with, and it includes an increase to the frequency of service, accessibility to the service. It's not always the easiest thing to get onto and off of, to start with, and then carry it through the entire experience. All right. We need to increase the assistance to lower income and marginalized groups in accessing the service as well, right? There's ways of reducing your fare or getting a subsidy with the fare, but it's a lot of hoops to jump through, and they're continuous, and there shouldn't really be there in the biggest and best city in Canada, right? This then ties in though, right? We start with that to kind of get people off of driving, but it's not because we want to eliminate driving. Right? Let's reduce the greenhouse gases, and then let's move towards electric. Let's increase electric infrastructure. Let's engage with our small businesses. Let's get going on retrofits for charging stations. But at the same time, let's incentivize the properties, right? We could use a fantastic renovation and revitalization of a lot of our areas that isn't condo developments, right? The Globe and Mail just put out an article talking about parking spots turned patios, had customers spend an estimated $181 million versus the 3.7 million that would have been generated through parking fees, right? I think a big thing is the city has a lot of great contributing strategies that are outlined in Transform TO, but and council is super quick to vote on a loftier goal and a more ambitious goal, but they don't implement any of it, right? We talk about a circular economy. Let's reduce and redesign and rethink the way we're using things, but we still allow political lawn signs made of corrugated plastic and plastic sleeve. Right? The city talks about engaging a little bit more, they've got 5 community reduce and reuse programs in the city. None of them are in our ward, right? We continue to allow single-use plastic bottles, all right? It's things like that kind of drive it away. Oh, and I guess I got to wrap up.
Well, thank you. Yes. And Mark, you're the last respondent on this question about climate change.
Thank you, Brian. And, climate change is one of the most pressing issues facing not only our city, the world today. And it's going to take cooperation from all levels of government to do our part. Council's done some great work here. There's a lot to do, but we approved the Transform TL Climate Action Strategy in 2017. We voted to accelerate, as Marco mentioned, the action targets by 10 years to net zero by 2040. Originally was 2050, 2040. Hopefully we can do better than 2040, but that's what we've set. We're building more transit. Electric charging stations in the area are coming in. I moved a motion through the planning process probably 10 years ago that every new development have the capacity to put in electric charging stations that they're in there because we know they were coming, right? We've committed to growing the city's tree canopy. We've planted thousands of trees. We have Colonel Sampson Park, Roy Curtis Park, Corby Park. We've planted thousands of trees over the last term. There's more to go. Some of our great ravine systems we have, I brought in a pilot project for a de-icing on our trail system to take the salt off. We're now trying to do it with sand. That's a project I personally brought in. And we're also have a pilot project that we're going to wash trash, water trash collecting systems in the rivers. We're looking at Humber River, Mimico Creek, and Etobicoke, where we're grabbing this trash before it goes into the Great Lakes. The Great Lakes is the greatest freshwater system in the world. We have to make sure it's protected. I'm privileged enough to represent a ward with a waterfront. So, we improved the Toronto Green Standards and accelerated targets to ensure, new buildings are near zero emissions sooner. And that has to happen. We've seen some of the initiatives of the green roofs, and what I talked about is putting electric charging stations in. We've talked about the tree planting. The Long Branch Neighborhood Association down there have gone as far as cataloged every single one of their trees in their community, and it's been great to work with them. They hand out free trees. Through the development process, where you've seen the lots splitting down on Long Branch, the trees are now getting more protection than just having the house being built around the tree. The houses will now be built around the tree. So there's many things that are happening. We got the bike share stations now are coming to our ward.
Mark, I'll ask you to summarize again.
Okay.
Please.
And listen, transit is where it's at. We have 3 GO stations, a 4th on the way. We have to get people in their cars. We will not travel through the city like we have been. The next 20, 30 years, we'll be traveling differently. We're the 4th largest city in North America, and that's what we have to do, but we have to work with our other levels of government and keep moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And our second question as we move forward, just mentioning again, we now have 23 questions in the Q&A, which is great. So keep those questions coming. Our second question is on social justice, and our first respondent will be you, Amber. And specifically, we would like to hear your thoughts on the actions City Council should take to facilitate a more economically and racially equitable city, reduce poverty, increase affordable housing access, improve community social and crisis services, etc. There's lots going on in the social sector. Please tell us what steps you as a councillor would take to advocate and promote the course or courses of action you outline.
Thank you, Brian. I really appreciate this question because my passion around social justice is part of the reason why I got involved in politics and my desire to be a leader to begin with. I grew up, as I might have been mentioned on the top, in a low-income neighborhood where I still live today. And I remember knocking on my neighbors' doors and advocating for the kinds of services and supports we needed, where in our community, 40% of the neighbors living here were living below the poverty line. And unfortunately, those requests and attempts for support and to engage with the city were ignored. And we did not necessarily get to the kinds of good policy and community building that I think we could have if we had been inclusive and centering the voices and experiences of those most affected. So that's my leadership style and that's my approach. One of the biggest and most important strategies that the city has adopted but not moved forward significantly on, in my opinion, is our poverty reduction strategy. It was great to see council adopt that. I think it was unanimously in principle, but it's been on the books for many years at this point, and we've not seen the recommendations be led or really intentionally funded and invested in to the point where we're seeing an impact and we're actually moving the needle forward. People who are coming from challenging socioeconomic circumstances circumstances with which largely and disproportionately impacts racialized newcomer communities need to have an opportunity to have a voice at the table, but also to access things like libraries, recreation centers, and other important city services like transit. We've just talked about and highlighted. Marco made a great point about the people who need to use this and are not getting the quality of service they deserve. So really paying attention and having a intentional and thoughtful approach to getting these policy pieces right with these folks in mind is how we're going to get to the solutions that we deserve as a city, and how we're going to work towards equity, inclusion, and building a community for all.
Thank you, Amber. And our next respondent is Marco.
So I think this needs to take a multifaceted approach, kind of like all the questions really are, right? And so I think this one begins with zoning for efficiencies. We need to start making better use of our land, and that enables people to make better use of it. Not large developers, not towers, but the actual, like Browns Line Mimico area is a great example of an area that can use a facelift, right? Add some EV charging, talking to what we were talking about before, but maybe they do a little bit of mixed use. You start adding extra to it. It's not just one thing going in, it increases density. We increase transit to there. And so we reduce some of the red tape and the bureaucracy that creates delays in progress, right? That'll then help with local business and all of that really to bring us to a livable city. A livable city allows for more freedom. It allows more freedom of movement. It allows more freedom of choice. And that includes support for everyone to give you that, right? Like our ward has 2 public daycares. We have 1 long-term care facility. Like those 2 things alone, the inability to find this type of support is forcing people, once again, to make professional, financial, personal decisions, or sacrifices, sorry. And instead we need to increase these and even more public resources, right? That would offer more housing affordability, and it would increase equity by allowing people to have that choice, right? Housing, I think, was really at the cornerstone of equity, because if you don't feel secure where you live, nothing else is going to really make you feel secure, right? Home is that place that keeps you grounded, that community as well. And so, for example, going back to lofty goals, but no implementation, I think we need a massive expansion of the multi-unit residential acquisition program. It makes permanently affordable units, but it's pitifully underfunded, right? For the prices in Toronto, it's a drop in the ocean, right? And if we want to hit the lofty goals by 2030, 40,000 affordable units, we don't do it in 10 million drips and drabs, right? We need to fund it. That provides stability to the community. The community then provides stability to each other. And that's how we support each other, and we get supported through our government.
Thank you very much. And lastly on this, second last on this question is Mark.
Thanks again, Brian. So, City Council has worked with an equitable lens on, all city matters. We have that now. And then let's build to improve and, innovate on how we do this. Ensure we are falling short on serving, equity-seeking groups. We got to continue to build and improve on transit. You've heard me talk about transit. We have the 4th GO station coming into our ward. We need to get people out of their cars, make it more accessible for all. We got to continue to fund the TTC Fare Pass discount program for seniors. We have one of the largest senior populations in the city. We have to fight for improved service on existing routes, and we do that all the time. We've got express buses now coming from Kipling down to Humber College, and we've got the Prince Edward bus that on the 10-minute frequency program in the peak times, right? We're continue to meet our Safer Streets program with our building Vision Zero programs around the schools. So we have to build more affordable units. We have a whole bunch in the pipeline. We've already built 1,000, but there's more to go. When people talk about not having these community centers, we're dealing with the deck that's been dealt. For example, the Christie's Center, that was never in the city's plan to have housing there, but Kraft sold the property off. It went to the OMB. Our solicitor said we have to settle on this, but what we got out of that was a new community center, a new pool, new library, state of the art. 2 daycares are going to go in there. We've reserved space for schools. That'll be a complete community, but that was never in our plan. The other side of Park Lawn going up to the QW, that was not in our plan. So sometimes the city's dealing with what the province has dealt with us, but you look at the 6 Points interchange. We have city-owned land where I came in. It was 20% affordable units going in there. I bumped that target to 30. We've got a tremendous amount of affordable housing going there, but back to the Kraft land. We have 1,500 new affordable units in there. We have We protected for 3,500 jobs on that site. So you talk about getting on your cars, a complete community where you walk out your door and walk right to your office there. So these are some of the things. The employment lands, council has put its foot down on the conversion of employment lands. In our area, we would not plan the way we did now, but back when I grew up here, we had the old Goodyear, Anaconda Brass, Continental Can, Campbell's Soup. People walked to work, but you know, these developers keep coming in, and you see the trucking terminal signs going everywhere. This is a developer that wants to convert these lands into townhomes and condos.
Mark,
But with that,
you got a red sign in front of you. I'm
but
sorry.
if we don't protect these employment lands and have people walk to work in their communities, we'll be driving to Sudbury to go to work. So it's important that we protect these lands and keep building on the transit.
Thank you. And lastly, Bonnie, on the question of social justice and equity.
Oh, hold on. Hold on.
Bonnie,
So
your
sorry
time's
about
running.
that. Okay. I personally belong in many categories that are not privileged. I come from a racialized immigrant background, and that has played a role in limiting the opportunity my family and I had growing up. I also have some disabilities, including visual impairment, which has set me back in school and in employment in terms of increasing affordable housing access and support taking any measure necessary to increase the supply. I support legalizing multi-tenant homes, multiplexing, removing minimum parking requirements, and speeding up the building process. I am a renter myself and have lost my housing on short notice in the past due to having to leave an unhealthy relationship and also harassment by a roommate, something that many renters, especially young women, have to worry about. To improve access to crisis services, I support not involving the police in mental health related matters and instead of utilizing mobile mental health teams. I have personal experience dealing with the mental health care system in Ontario, and it took years before I received a level of care that I felt was adequate. Mental health is an increasing crisis among the younger generation, and I have seen it with myself and so many of my friends. I would like to see more counselors and their services being offered to increase community, social, and housing, community, social, and crisis services. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're now going to the last pre-authorized, pre-prepared question, and that is on the economy. And Marco, you will be the first to answer this one. Specifically, we'd like you to hear your thoughts on the actions City Council should take to facilitate the creation of more good-paying jobs in Toronto, particularly green economy jobs, the promotion of economic growth in Toronto, particularly in green industries, training the workforce for these new jobs, and ensuring that adequate funding for a sustainable economy and city is found. Please tell us then what steps you as a councillor would take to advocate and promote the course or courses of action you outline in response to this question. Go ahead.
Okay, so thank you. And I like this one because it touches doing everything else really, really well makes this part, in my mind, actually really, really easy. Because going back to the walkable, livable city, if you accomplish that where most people are doing things within 15, 20 minutes, walk or bike ride of their home, well, you're going to need them to work there too, right? And so like it starts kind of growing from there. That need to work there that encourages further growth in that area, right? That growth then spurs community resources, it spurs small businesses. They encourage well-paying trade jobs to expand their businesses and resources in community. But then through proper implementation of policy and of modern building codes, building standards, getting everything up to 2022 and beyond, then that needs a workforce with a higher skill set as well, right? From there, nothing happens in a vacuum, right? You're gonna have community groups that offer the ability to transfer into those skill sets. You're gonna have government groups that offer that from a different angle, right? You're gonna be able to take a multifaceted approach to tackling employment because the employment's available and it's there. We've once again given people freedom of movement, freedom of choice. Now that they're not making that professional sacrifice and that financial sacrifice they're able to take a step back, take a deep breath, and look at what they want. And with more local employment, these skills will drive other local organizations, right? And then this ties us back to the community resources, the livable city. You start having community gardens, community kitchens. We don't have many of those in our ward, right? That fosters community. That encourages you to stay here. It allows you to age in your community. It encourages your family to stay here as well, right? It's not just about getting older in your community. You want your younger family to be able to afford to live there and work there as well. Otherwise, you stay there by yourself anyway, right? And so we need that community. It starts with the infrastructure and the investment in that. But from there, employment flows, community flows, and then that sense of community will encourage participation. And without participation, democracy dies. And we're seeing that with low voter turnouts, and we're seeing it with low candidate registration. Let's be totally real, right? And so we need that engagement. We need that community. We need everyone to get involved, because to make change happen, you have to vote for change.
Thank you, Marco. And Mark, you are next on the economy.
Thank you. So I think we're well on our way to our recovery efforts. Still, work to do there. But the pandemic was absolutely devastating to our small business community. I think we all understand that. This term, we've cut taxes for small businesses. We've established a new program like Cafe TO, Curb TO, that allowed the restaurants to get outside, have their customers still participate in the restaurants. We partnered with tech sectors in the business transition on the online platform for them. Again, back to protecting our employment lands. We have, I think, 600 every 5 years. We review the official plan on these conversions. And I think we had like 600 conversion requests come forward that we are not supporting. We need to protect the employment lands. As Marco said, it's great to be able to walk to work, and this is what we have to do. On the city lands that we do control, and the ones we don't, like the Christie lands, again, where we've negotiated a settlement, we've negotiated good jobs on that site. So 3,500 jobs is no small feat, but these are the things we have to continue to do. Our climate action targets, we expect to see a rise in economic activity in the green sector. Our net zero existing building strategy is expected to increase local business retrofit economic activity by 87% over the next 30 years. It's also expected to create additional 7,000 direct full-time jobs over the next 30 years. And we continue to support our local business community. I'm shocked by a lot of people that, especially on the lakeshore, we've been trying to revitalize and get better shops and restaurants that still don't go up and support these new restaurants when they come in. When they do come in, it's our job as a community to come and support them. We have some great business in the area, and we want to attract more. So there's lots being done on that front. I'm the vice chair of economic development, and we have some great initiatives happening throughout the city to get us back on full recovery. I'm concerned about the rising of the interest rates, but we've done a lot, and we can do more.
Thank you, Mark. And Bonnie, you are next on the economy.
My generation has been unlucky job-wise. I was in high school when the Great Recession hit. I had wanted to work since I was 15, but had no luck finding any jobs. I ended up only earning about $600 in high school, which I spent entirely on textbooks in my first semester of post-secondary. I ended up earning a business diploma when I was 21, only to be met with another recession during the oil crash, a result of not investing in green jobs. I worked in grocery stores for years, and workers in this industry are very diversely educated. At one store I worked at, there were employees who have studied economics, design, and library science, are working 6 days a week, trying to pay down their OSAP debt, along with high school students who only worked a few months of weekend shifts. There should be a better match between what programs are offered in post-secondary education schools and what the market really needs. I appreciate how working from home, which is green as that it avoids commutes, has become more accepted since the pandemic, and I hope it continues. Thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. And lastly is Amber on the economy.
Thank you, Brian, and I really appreciate this question. I think it's a hugely important one, and this is an area in which I do agree with the councillor. I think, keeping our employment lands protected and supporting their growth and development, specifically towards the green sector and the green industry, is the way I think forward for us. I also want to agree with Bonnie, and Marco mentioned as well, the idea of 15-minute communities speaks directly to our Complete Communities platform as well at ambermorley.com for those who haven't been able to check it out yet. But I think when we look at, again, the current crises and challenges that we are facing, we need to face them boldly, and we need to move the correct and appropriate actions forward. So supporting local businesses like StoreStack, which is a container refurbishment and modular container shipping container company located right in our ward. What are the opportunities and the potential there? We hear time and time again about how expensive it is to do anything in the city, and how much money we need to be able to negotiate for developers to build one single unit of affordable housing. Well, how are we looking at, again, alternative outside of the box opportunities that both support the green economy, local businesses, as well as recruiting new green industries to our neighborhood and to our employment lands? We've got such a wealth of opportunity to have our local residents connected and engaged with the natural infrastructure, our natural spaces, and also educating and training up our young ones and our future leaders to understand the value of the natural world and also preparing them for the future green economy. Those are some of the priorities that I'll have as city councillor, and I really look forward to providing real leadership on this piece.
Thank you, Amber. You're all doing so well. Thank you so much. I want to now shift focus just slightly in that we'll be receiving questions from the audience, and with only 4 candidates instead of 5, we've saved a little time. I'm hoping to get maybe as many as 3, but at least 2 questions from the audience that each of you can respond to within 2 minutes. Our first question from the audience is this: what specifically will you do? And sorry, Mark, you will be the first to respond. What specifically will you do to ensure that housing development serves the needs of all current and aspiring residents equitably? What would you do to ensure there are deeply affordable housing units in the redevelopment of the Christie site? Some earlier reference was made, but that specific question has come from a number of residents. So Mark, go ahead. You have 2 minutes for that one.
Yeah, so number one, Brian, we're already doing that. We're bringing water files and use online over the last term. Thousands have been built under Anna Bailau's leadership from our housing. We've secured, like I said, 1,500 new affordable units at the Christie site. We've already done that. When you talk about a nurse that may work for a dentist in the city here, she's deemed to need affordable housing. So there's all types of affordable housing, supportive housing. We have the Open Door Affordable Housing Program. We have in our ward new supportive housing for seniors. We got the Helen Keller site on 8th Street, the old Legion for the blind and deaf. We've just approved that housing in there. We have on the Queensway a new seniors housing going in there. Again, on the city lands and the 6 points that we control, we are going to find our development partner there. We'll be able to tell them what we're requiring. So I said, when I took that site over from the former councillor back in the last term, the target was 20%. I talked to Anna Bailau. I said we can do better. I pushed to 30%. The Cloverdale Mall, another one that the seniors, it's almost like a community center, Cloverdale Mall. The developer came in and is redeveloping there. So they've heard loud and clear that there has to be something for seniors. But we're going to continue to push. And every development, we are pushing for more housing. And I could take you on the small end. The Blue Goose site in Mimico, where we got a very small site, but we pushed that developer to give us 2 affordable units at a very small site. But on the big issue, the Christie site, 1,500. On the 6 point, 30% affordable. I will continue to fight with that and to continue to work with the council to put more housing options into this city. It's important that, I always say that your favorite restaurant on Lakeshore, or wherever you're going to go to your favorite restaurant, the person working in the back of the kitchen can't afford to come from Halton Hills or Barrie on transit to work in. So it's got to be a very livable city for everybody, and people have to be able to live in their neighborhood and make it make the neighborhood go around. So those are the kind of things I will continue to fight for and continue to fight on Dundas Street for affordable housing as these developers come in.
Thank you, Mark. And Amber, you're next on this question of affordable housing.
Thank you, Brian. Sorry, I know you said you weren't going to say the questions again, and I don't want to waste
I
any
could,
time.
let
But
me read it again for you if
thank
you
you.
need it. What
Thank you.
specifically will you do to ensure that housing development serves the needs of all current and aspiring residents equitably? And what would you do to ensure there are deeply affordable housing units in the redevelopment of the Christie site?
Thank you for the restating the question there. I appreciate it. Yeah, as the councillor mentioned, there is an opportunity for the local councillor to work directly with applicants and developers who are looking to build on either city property or even private land. They do have to go through a planning approvals process at the city, and there is an incredible opportunity there for the current councillor or future councillor to work with them to negotiate and improve the affordability within that unit. In some instances, you have to negotiate, maybe you give up a few parking spaces or you allow a little bit more height and density. But those are the negotiations that need to take place in order to realize the affordable units within new development. And that's something I would be absolutely committed to doing. I'm also in favor of densification within areas that are already earmarked for it. So we see a lot of condos going up on the Queensway where there's existing infrastructure. It's close to the highway, there are subways nearby, and those are the spaces and places that I would like to see the kind of very high density that we've seen over the years. But we've heard time and time again from residents that the infrastructure to support both current and new residents are critical. And it's not something that should be negotiated and kicked down the road for 10 years, which is something that happened in my cooperative development. 10 years after moving in, we found out there was a few $1 million sitting in a pot somewhere to build a community center that was never acted upon until, again, many years down the road. So residents want to see urgency to the kinds of supports and infrastructure that are surrounding the affordable units that we can negotiate as part of the growth and development we're seeing in our ward.
And lastly, Marco, on this question of affordable housing and equity for current and aspiring residents.
Okay, so again, I think this gets achieved by the implementation of things that the city's already identified. It's the ability to get the rubber to meet the road that I personally have the biggest issue with, and I feel like a lot of the residents agree with me. Draw a hard line. I believe the city should take a harder stance. This idea that developers are like, well, what about a little bit less, a little bit less? No, are you actually telling me that they're going to stop a development and not build in Toronto? They won't. We need to drive a harder line. We have a strong mayor thing going back to that. Like, you need councillors that are going to represent and draw that line in the sand. And it is a line in the sand, absolutely. Because once that tower is up and there isn't affordable housing, like, you're not going backwards on that. It's not changing. It needs to be done now. It needs to get implemented. You need to draw that line, right? From there, though, the thing with equity is, you want to decrease driving, you have to increase funding. And it's the same thing, funding for transit. And it's the same thing here. You want to draw a harder line, create that line for affordable housing to be made by, actually, you also need to increase the funding for the programs that fund the people that are seeking out affordable housing, right? You need to help them maintain and respect the dignity of the person. And that's by funding it and by not making it a disaster to get through. It doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be a painful process to live here. It shouldn't be. It's frankly, when people tell you about it, like, you're in awe at just how brutal the process can be for people. And so it's the process that humans go through that we need to expand, and the process that corporations go through. I'll be honest, I'm okay with not. I'm totally okay with not. They don't vote anyway. So, let's work on the residents. Let's work on the people. Let's take care of us, draw that line in the sand. Let's add humanity to our process, because there are tough decisions that are made, but it's the resident that feels that. It's that person who's seeking that assistance that has to ask for it. And now they're being told, well, maybe, kind of, sort of. That's insulting, and we shouldn't tolerate that as a ward or as a city.
Thank you very much. And I'm doing a quick math calculation in my mind here, and I think I'm going to try to squeeze in another question. I may only give you 1.5 minutes for this question to answer this question. And then you'll have 2 minutes for a closing remark, each of you.
I haven't answered
Bonnie,
yet.
I didn't give you a chance. I'm so sorry. Bonnie, you go ahead for that last question.
No worries. I support taking the no developer money pledge. I believe that elected officials should not take any funding from developers. They should be separate. And I also support building more densified units. That includes multiplexing, splitting a single family lot into 4, and which quadruples the amount of housing there is on one lot. And I also support legalizing multi-tenant houses. So a resident can rent just a room, and which is something that is desperately needed. And as someone who has roommates myself, it is my preferred way of living. And I think that's it.
So thank you. And again, listen, Bonnie, you're going to be the first to answer this next question, and I'm going to only give you a minute and a half, okay, for each of you. This audience question number 2, and we had 45 questions inputted into the Q&A. That's fantastic response from the people who are observing this. So thank you to all for your question submissions. But this second question is this: Toronto residents will be electing city councillors who will hold power during a critical moment for advancing climate action. We know that Toronto's carbon footprint is too big. In 2019, the City of Toronto declared a climate emergency. If elected, what equitable steps will you take in achieving the City of Toronto Transform TO target? And will you support the scaling up and funding of deep retrofit programs and a low carbon job strategy that supports decent work? So Bonnie, you're first, so I don't forget you.
First, to reduce the carbon footprint of each resident, I support transforming how transportation trips are made. So that would mean taking as many cars off the road as possible, and instead investing in the TTC and GO Transit, in building more subways, in increasing the capacity and frequency of bus services. And I believe the main factor that influences climate change in the city is transportation. And I have seen other cities like New York and other cities in Asia where it is the norm to use transit and not have a private vehicle. And I would think the carbon footprint per capita of residents in those places are much lower than they are per Toronto resident. I believe transportation is the way, investing in green transportation is the way to go.
Thank you, Bonnie. And Amber, you are next on this question of climate action, our carbon footprint, and equitable steps in achieving Transform TO's targets.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. I think this is, as we've talked about throughout this evening, it's an incredibly important priority for so many, especially my generation. And when we consider, the next generation and what kind of a mess they're inheriting, we've gone a long time without really wanting to face or kind of putting Band-Aid solutions, which seems to be, one of our favorite things as a city is throwing a Band-Aid on it and kicking it down the road. And this is not one of those problems. We absolutely need to face it boldly and intentionally. And so some of the areas that we've highlighted, including in transportation funding and investment. We see the top line item in our city budget is not moving the city. And if we're looking at that as a priority, then we need to be really understanding where our priorities and our funding needs to lie in order to get the best results for residents and in order to achieve the targets that we've set out for ourselves. I'm really glad and excited to have been endorsed by the Toronto Bikeways Coalition, who are working to ensure we have the kind of protected and connected bike lanes within our city, because even more than moving around via bus or transit, you can use your, power your own vehicle without having to utilize any natural resources. That's an incredible way forward. I was excited to hear about the pilot project happening to eliminate salt and looking at sand, but sand is also not a renewable resource, right? So again, it's sort of like, how are we really tackling these challenges in long-term sustainable ways, recruiting new green economy jobs and new green sectors into our community, and really prioritizing, honoring and stewarding our green spaces, our tree canopy in intentional ways. So we're meeting our targets of not around 27% of green coverage, but getting to that 40%. So every building, every file that comes in front of me as your councillor, I will ensure that I have an eco-centric lens on it and ensure that we're getting the best value both for the environment and for Etobicoke-Lakeshore residents.
Thank you. And I know this is hard when we've squeezed you all on this question, but Marco, you are next on this question.
Thank you very much. So to kind of head at the question directly, like I would support the idea of scaling and funding deep retrofit programs. But the reason I say idea is because like there's a lot of avenues that can take. And sure, absolutely, some of them are mandatory, but some not so much, right? So you got to take a balanced approach to it, but absolutely. And I think that would start creating that demand for the greener, more technologically advanced jobs that require that additional training that also pay that better salary, right? And if Toronto's the center that's happening in, if Toronto in a climate sense becomes the center of the universe, because we all know Toronto already is the center of the universe, then the green jobs and all that will follow it as well, right? The low carbon strategy will follow it and it'll all flow inward. From there, though, you have to balance it, right? If you offer a lot of retrofit programs to homeowners, the equity side of that means you also have to fund a lot of community. You need your community gardens, community kitchens, right? Those encourage people to foster community, but also to grow their own food, to teach each other about growing food. You compare that up with programs that teach people about making their own meals, balanced diets, educate people on it. And then that reduces the drag on other things. And that allows people to live a more fulfilling life equitably, right? You're going towards the converting your own home and all that kind of retrofit programs. You need enforcement for the other side of it, right? The landlord tenant board needs to be able to, in a timely fashion, deal with concerns for both the resident and for the landlord. Like nobody deserves to be in limbo, right? Going beyond that, we get to the bylaw side of it. By having more bylaw officers, they can enforce the rules and the bylaws to ensure the residents are in safe, accessible housing. And if there's concerns, they get addressed and they're addressed promptly because that's where people live. And that's how we go forward in an equitable fashion.
Thank you very much, Marco. And lastly, Mark, on this question.
Thank you. Well, I believe at the city level, we've taken significant action to do our part. Is it enough? Absolutely not. But I will continue to work with our TO action, climate action strategy that was approved in 2017. And I'll continue to work on any variation of that plan with council. Again, building more transit. We have the tunnel machines in the ground, electric charging stations, which I talked about years ago, to put in all these new condos. We're electrifying our fleet at the TTC in the city. Electric buses also help support that. Continue to grow our tree canopy, which we've done a good job. Again, we still have to increase it. We've reduced greenhouse gas emissions in the city 38% from 1990 levels. Our goal was 30% in 2020, but we exceeded our targets and have set one of the most ambitious climate action strategies in North America. And is it enough? No, it's not. But we have to continue to invest in all these things. Investing $160 million over the next 10 years in the cycling electric plan is huge. It's for the cycling community, it's probably not enough, but $160 million over the next 10 years, it's a massive amount of money. We need to electrify our city fleets, as I said, with the TTC, and we're working on getting people out of their cars. That's what we have to do. We have the net zero existing building strategy to bring our buildings to the next net zero emission, because they account for 55% of the total of city emissions, 55% of the total of city emissions. This term we produced the Better Homes TO program to help residents make their own home more energy efficient. I will continue to work with council and continue to drive that forward. The city's doing their part, but we have to work with the region, and everyone in the world has to work together to tackle this problem, which is a massive problem.
Thank you. Now, just doing another quick calculation. I think we have time for one more question from the audience, and I do have it in front of me. So Amber, you're going to be the first to respond to this one. And again, it'll be about a minute and a half, and then we're going to turn to each of you for that question and then for closing remarks. But this question is about noise pollution. We have a number of people concerned about climate and so on. And this question says, the neighborhood suffers increasingly from noise pollution such as modified exhausts, racing cars, bikes, fireworks, older model jet skis, and so on. What can be done to further enforce our existing bylaws? And what more do we need to mandate respect in a high density neighborhood in Etobicoke? So go ahead, Amber, on this question of noise pollution.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah, this is one that I've heard a lot at the doors, especially in Humber Bay Shores community and surrounding neighborhoods, even down at Prince of Wales, 3rd Street Park, which I live fairly close to. We hear about fireworks on not just special occasions and the disruption to the natural environment and, the stress that it puts on some pets and children, that are sleeping at night. And so this is an ongoing issue that is interrupting the quality of life for residents here, and especially being a lakefront community, those sounds echo off the water. So it's, it's even more intensified. I think we need to be working directly with both our enforcement units. So municipal licensing and standards, I believe, is the enforcement body, and forgive me if I'm mistaken there. It's been a few years since I've been at City Hall, but working with the appropriate enforcement body and making sure that they have the resources and the staffing to respond to the concerns and complaints coming forward in as urgent way as possible, working collaboratively with our local Toronto Police Division as well, so that they can go to the calls that our City Hall team or our city staff through the licensing group would not be able to, or through the enforcement group rather. And then certainly working as well in terms of the exhausts and the car issue with our counterparts at the Ontario licensing, so that vehicles who are being licensed and when they're going in for their annual renewals, that they are being checked for these kinds of issues and that they're keeping up with the rules and regulations around what's allowed. And again, encouraging folks to report in violators and having a robust team in place at the city who can address and who are assigned for enforcement.
Thank you, Amber. And next is Marco on this question of noise pollution.
Right. Truthfully, I think you've already actually kind of given the answer, and it's to enforce our existing bylaws. And I mentioned it earlier a couple of times, and that's city council governs by pointing direction, taking input and directing where we want, right? All this noise pollution is things we don't want. And in this case, it's already things that are our bylaws and they're not allowed. And we need to enforce that. And that's how we get that respect, because the way it currently is, you feel like not everything is for everyone, right? Some rules are enforced, sometimes they aren't. Some people get investigated, some people don't. Some get looked into, some don't. And that's crazy, right? To give an example I think is bang on, but slightly different, is near me, I have a don't turn right on red that everybody turns right on red. And so either change that to not be a right on red, to not be illegal, or get an officer there to enforce it, right? Like, why do we leave it in a situation where you can pick and choose that it gets enforced? And that ties into the noise pollution. It shouldn't be able to pick and choose when you get that noise pollution, right? I live near the 427. You hear those cars rip and roar all night, right? Why? Like, now they're picking and choosing when it's followed, and that's just not acceptable, right? And so it comes from the funding of the existing program, right? Get the bylaw enforcement out there, get them more funded, allow people to have their complaints and investigate them, right? Allow that to actually go to fruition, do the due process, and then we move forward with the actual solution, right? Looked into it, this is it, solution, right? We've already addressed these things, we just aren't acting on them. And that's what's driving me crazy.
And Mark, you are next on this question of noise pollution.
Thank you. And all due respect to Marco, we are working on. The council's already working to tackle a lot of these problems. Number one, city councils is not direct enforcement. We don't direct the police, but we work very closely. I work very closely with our unit, always have. We've asked the province to increase fines for the modified exhaust systems that are out there. You see them on Instagram. You can just screw them into your muffler pipe. So that is a huge problem. Back in the day, we would have a division of the police where you would get pulled over, and if your car had emissions or a loud noise, you would get a ticket. You had to appear at that yard within 3 days and get it corrected, or you would get a bigger fine. These are some of the things I'd like to take another look at. You talk about that top budget line, the police. I do not support defunding the police. I haven't had anyone tell me about defunding the police. All I've heard is I want to see more police on our streets, and I'm going to be moving that we increase. As this city's grown, our complement of officers have not grown with that. At any given time, I think our complement's 4950 police officers, and any given time we get 1,000 to 1,500 officers off that complement. That's not even including the officers retiring every week in the service. We've got the police college in our ward. We're having trouble finding the right candidates to bring through the college to keep those numbers up. Everyone's telling me they want to see more police, but our police are going to be working with our bylaw officers. I moved a motion to hire 40 new MLS priorities, hiring of 40 new bylaw officers to work with the police on some of these issues. The fireworks was a major problem, not only here down in the beaches. I worked with Councillor Bradford, and we worked with a residence group down in Hubbard Bay Shores. It was a fireworks residence group. We took a lot of the recommendations, worked with city staff. Fireworks are not permitted to go off in our parks, but people are going down 3, 4 in the morning, and people were absolutely livid. And we put a lot of resources down there to tackle that problem. So we're going to continue to work with that, but we are on it. We hear loud and clear, and we're going to continue to work with the manufacturers that in our area. We have some truck alarms that have trucks in there that have a backup alarm, which is mandated. It's mandated by the province. So there are competing interests sometimes with residents being right beside industrial areas, and that's what we live in. So how we can mitigate that? We have a lot of great business owners that you just got to pick up the phone, talk to them. A lot of those problems have been solved, but we're on it loud and clear, and the city hears it.
Thank you, Mark. And lastly, Bonnie, on this question of noise pollution.
I remember hearing the noise from the air show at the CNE at the start of September every year for many years, and during the pandemic it disappeared, and I was grateful that I did not hear the noise from the air shows. So, and that should be applied to any sort of noise. The fireworks that I have heard, especially at night, are distracting, and I've heard that they are triggering to certain people who have PTSD. I've heard that refugees have a problem with that noise. And I think the solution has already been said by the other candidates, that there should be more bylaw enforcement.
Now, friends, we had told you at the beginning of this process a few weeks ago now, I guess a week ago, that you'd have 2 minutes to summarize. We're going to give you 2.5 because we've squeezed in 3 questions, and you've got just a little over 2 minutes now to do summary statements, and then we'll close for the evening and urge people to vote. I want to note that we had 58 questions listed in our Q&A, which is a tremendous amount of participation by our audience. So thank you so much, all of you who put in those questions. Obviously, we couldn't get them all in. But I'm going to turn first to Marco for our closing statement of 2.5 minutes. Marco.
So again, I want to thank everyone for being here, the participants. 59 questions, like I didn't know what I was walking into. I'll be honest, this is my first like major thing virtual like this, and yeah, I didn't know what to expect. I definitely appreciate it. So thank everyone for making your time. Thank you for hosting. Candidates, thank you for coming out. Again, it's always fun when we all hang out. And so I want to end off kind of talking again about why I believe I'm best suited to carry us forward into the next part of what Ward 3 needs. Again, it brings us back to like, we need action. We need to stop kind of working, grouping everything and start getting that rubber on the road, right? We need to start moving forward. People want action. People need action, right? We need climate action, not just climate policy. We need to go forward with these things. All of it requires that, right? We're kind of stuck in this inertia. We're underserved. We kind of are starting to accept it, right? People have just stopped taking transit, right? We're not forcing the issue. We've stopped taking transit. Our highways are busier than ever. Our roads are busier than ever, right? Traffic calming measures aren't really working, right? People are still worried about going down their streets. You know, our streetlights don't work. I tell you what neighborhood I live in, but I'm sure all of you agree, right? So it's those things. And we need to start kicking that can. We need to start getting it going, get that machine moving. And I feel that I'm perfectly suited for that, right? My role in the infantry was to be at the pointy end of the spear, making the action happen. And that's where I want to be now, right? I feel like my background brings me to it. I feel like that's what we need. And I feel that I'm approachable. I feel that anyone who's met me so far has been very comfortable just kind of hanging out and shooting with me and letting me know what's going on. And that's what I like about this, actually. I feel that it suits my personality. If you tell me that my job is to go out, meet all of you, take your concerns and voice them for you and together at City Hall, like, I'm perfectly your person. And for that reason, I'm going to ask all of you to go out and vote. We need to participate. We need to pick our leaders, right? Everyone needs to get out, put your voice out there, right? I'll be honest, you can't complain if you don't vote. I'm not saying the person you vote for wins, but you can't complain if you didn't even vote. So you got to get out there, get to the polls. There actually is tons of them, right? I'll tell you about all the things that aren't really working. Voting actually is, like, we've got the resources, the polls are there. Everyone needs to get out there. I think you should vote for me. I'm a fresh face. I'm a new direction. I think about these problems a little bit differently because my background's been a little bit different. But I still live here. I'm still one of the people in our area. I'm one of the residents. I'm a father, a partner, and also I live here. So let's vote for change.
Thank you, Marco. And Mark, you have your 2.5 minutes for a closing remark.
Thank you, Brian. Again, I'll just keep this short and sweet. I do want to thank our host tonight. And I want to thank all the other candidates for joining us and putting their name on the ballot. It really takes courage to put your name on a ballot and put your name forward. So I do want to recognize my other candidates. You know, listen, I love this community. I'd love to continue to serve you. I know the area I walk on. Like I said, I've grown up here and I really love what I do. We've had a tough 4 years ahead of us, and I think I have the experience. I know I have the experience necessary to continue to lead Canada's largest municipal board in the country. Other candidates are calling for change, but I've delivered it. Here is 150 points on this brochure you'll be getting the next couple of days. I've done for our community. It's actually larger than this, but we couldn't fit it all. But here's 150. This is my real record. I've delivered change. The bottom line is I love being able to help people. My heart here is Etobicoke-Lakeshore. I'm raising my family here. My grandkids are here. I hope I can count on your support on October 24th so we can keep our community moving forward and build on the progress we've made to date. And Marco, I'd hang out with you any day. So those are my comments, and thanks for having me tonight.
Thank you very much, Mark. And next is Bonnie, your closing remark.
Thanks for listening to me. I believe I am the youngest candidate on the ballot. I believe I am the only one who is in their 20s or who is on this ballot. And I believe I have, my generation has many ideas that are fresh and can be brought to the table. I personally define myself as straddling the line between millennial and Generation Z, the generation that grew up on the internet. And I believe we have been exposed to ideas from around the world at an early age, and that includes being passionate about issues such as climate change, social justice, economic justice. A lot of young people my age feel hopeless about being able to afford housing, and I would like to come up with solutions to help mitigate that and to bring more hope. And I also hope to change how transit is used. I would like to see it be the dominant form of of transportation in the city, and that I believe that car dependency should decrease. One, to help with meeting climate targets, and then to be more equitable, so that people with, for example, with disability, mobility requirements, other concerns about driving don't have to face whatever issue that makes them hesitant to drive, and rely on a professional transportation service to take them around the city, and also support densification and walkable cities, so that everything that one needs, whether it be food, entertainment, any shopping purchases that need to be made, parks, are all within walking distance, and also transit stops. And that there should be densification around transit stops, so that as many people as possible will make use of those stops and have more choice in where they choose to work or travel around the region. I believe that I am bringing some very fresh ideas to the table, and I have been an essential worker for the past 5 years, and including 3 years in this neighborhood. And
Bonnie, there's a red card in front of you, I'm afraid.
thank you.
I do appreciate your response. And Amber, you have the last word tonight. Well, I have the last word after you, but
You have the last word, Brian. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say thank you again to the organizers, and of course to my fellow candidates. It's great to see everybody here. And honestly, as someone mentioned earlier, this is what democracy is all about. People want to see active, engaged, and transparent leadership at all levels of government, especially through the pandemic. I've heard that loud and clear from residents, is that they want to know who their representation is. They want to know that they can contact them, and that they can have a conversation with them directly. And that's the kind of counselor that I plan to be, is an accessible one, someone who listens to residents and centers your voices. The reality is we are living in a city right now, and we are on the tail end of a pandemic. Important recovery work is to come. I was really proud of the pandemic to be the coordinator for South and Central Etobicoke's vaccine engagement team. So working with a team of 25 ambassadors who I trained and supported, and along with 21 local agencies, to deliver deep supports around the vaccine, around the pandemic, informing and educating those most hard to reach in our community to keep us all safe. This is an example of the work that I've done and I continue to do from grade 5, volunteering and supporting the Breakfast Club, all the way to today, working as a health promoter at Lamp Community Health Center and focusing on issues of health equity, race equity, and so many other important and frankly challenging issues that we're still struggling to get right. I think that representation matters. Having a diversity of experiences at the decision-making table gets to better policy outcomes for residents. We've had 19 years, and thank you, Councillor, for your service. I think, folks are really happy about being the best community in the whole city. I know we all feel that way, and we want to lead ourselves forward into the future with a vision where equity and inclusion are not just performative words, but where we really are doubling down on representing and showing the world what diversity brings to the table and all that we can be as a community together. So if you're ready to vote for a community for all, visit ambermorley.com. Make sure you have a plan on October 24th, and follow us along on socials at Morley for Ward 3. And I just wanted to say a really huge shout out to the incredible community members who are helping to lead this campaign this time around. Folks were out for change. They are excited about what we are building and what we're representing. And I've been able to honestly lean on just the most incredible Etobicoke-Lakeshore inspiring residents who are just as committed to this change as I am. So thank you all, team, and thank you all residents, and thank you all organizers for having us.
Well, thank you to all of you. It's been a privilege to be the moderator tonight, and not just because of hearing all the ideas that have come from the 4 of you, but To enable well over 100 people to take part in this process tonight is a testament to democracy. And we in our sponsoring organizations care deeply about hearing residents and enabling residents to hear from leaders. And that's what we've done tonight. We hope that you've enjoyed it. There is going to be an advanced a poll that will be launched where you can share your comments as part of the public record about tonight. And it will come on the screen when I'm done talking. I'm a preacher, so be careful. But I will close momentarily here. And I just wanted to say as well, we really encourage you all, if you haven't yet voted in the advanced polls in Etobicoke-Lakeshore, do get out there either in the remaining advanced polls or on the 24th and vote for the candidate of your choice, because as Marco and others have said, if you don't vote, it's hard to complain about your leadership. So thank you very much for participating tonight, and we look forward to continuing to serve the community as sponsoring organizations, and best of luck to the candidates who took part tonight. All the best to you all.
Thanks again for hosting. Have a great night.
Thank you. That was great.
Thanks to all the candidates for attending. Well done, everybody.
Alex, we got a little mixed up on the time there, but I'll
Yeah, that was my fault. I
we
got
recovered. That's okay.
Yeah.
We recovered. I did the math, so
Yeah, I have no idea. Something happened in my head where I thought we had to be finished at 8.
oh yeah, okay.
And I don't know what happened. I just lost complete track of what I was doing there. So I
That's
apologize for that, but we recovered and we're fine.
I think the number of questions that we asked were amazing. Like, I mean, sorry, the number